Hey everyone, welcome back to the Global Medical Device Podcast. My name is Etienne Nichols. I'm the host for today's episode. Today, I want to explore a little bit about words and how words matter, particularly patient and customer. Are you a patient or a customer? The language used by healthcare, um, it often explains why getting simple, efficient service feels nearly impossible. We're diving into the staggering friction and a lot of inefficiencies that when systems forget you're a consumer of a service, things change a little bit. For example, if you drive 45 minutes, 30 minutes, you wait, you spend hours of your time uh, waiting for a certain service, but then you don't get the service you're after. There's some different nuances there. We can talk about a little bit about that. I want to dive into that a little bit later. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. My guest today is Dr. Allison Komiyama, PhD. She's experienced some different frustrations herself, and she also has a lot of strong opinions. Some that we may be on the same page with, some we may not be. But Allison Komiyama is the CEO and founder of Bluestocking Health, a company dedicated to redefining the conversation around medical technologies, including devices, digital health, IVD. She's also a board advisor for Indie MedTech, a community for independent medtech professionals. And Komiyama's extensive background is rooted in regulatory affairs, including a tenure as a biologist, reviewer at the FDA, where she reviewed orthopedic devices, consulted on biocompatibility, and prior to founding Bluestocking Health, she served as the VP of MedTech Innovation at RQM Plus and was the principal consultant of her own firm, which was later acquired Acknowledged Regulatory Strategies, where she focused on developing marketing strategies and preparing regulatory submissions, 510K, IDE, PMAs for a diverse range of medical device companies globally. I'll stop. What did I miss? Anything I need to fill in there? Allison, how you doing?
You missed that I am an avid face painter and I've really gotten into propagating houseplants recently. So, hey, maybe there'll be more videos on my feed
Okay, and if you
about
don't
that.
follow Allison on LinkedIn, you need to. My kids even follow you. They loved
No
the
way.
face painting video. Not gonna lie, they really did like that.
I had my first gig recently. My friend invited me to her kid's birthday party to do face painting,
That's
and I
fantastic.
had so much fun. Some kid came up though and was like, "Can you do an axolotl?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can. I've never done that before, but here we go." And it was maybe I'll put a picture
I
in
don't
the
know what it
comments
is
for
about
this.
the axolotl. A friend of mine
They're
just got one
just
of
so
anyway.
cute. They're so cute. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yeah, big fan. Anyway, we're not here to talk about axolotls. We're here to talk about words and how
let's
words
talk
matter.
about words.
Let's talk about
So
words.
you
Actually, and
worked
you
with, yeah, go
can
ahead.
I say that this topic is actually kind of your fault in a good way? That there was like a post that you had put up, and it was like an experience that you had, and then you asked a question about, what are the words that we should be using? And it was such a thoughtful dialogue. I love the things that you post too. If you're not following, Etienne Nichols on LinkedIn, you should be because it was like people were chiming in and I took that conversation of like patient versus caregiver versus or patient versus user versus customer and customer service and all these different words, and I took it to actually MedTech conference and I asked it at a like a patient advocacy panel. Fascinating, like the response that we got back. And so I'm really glad that you and I get to kind of continue this conversation because I think it's a really interesting one.
Yeah. And maybe before we get into the conversation, this is going to be a little bit meta. I know you are Blue Stocking Health. I sort of glossed over that a little bit. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is? Because that really is something more about bringing the conversation to medtech. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about that too before we get too far?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. And it's also bringing the conversation medtech and the medtech into the conversation. I kind of see this. It's been a like this thought in the back of my mind for a long time of when people would ask me like, "What do you do?" And an easy way would be I help medical device companies get through FDA. That was like an easy few words, and people understood it.
Yeah.
And then they were like, but what does that mean? And so I started saying, okay, give me a disease. Like, tell me a disease that's either impacted your life or that one that like you've been dealing with a family member recently. And so you know, they would say asthma or breast cancer, or, they'd bring something up.
Yeah.
And then I'd say, let me tell you about the 5 recent devices that have just come out that help diagnose or help with the removal of breast cancer tissue or like it was the conversation of like people didn't know a lot about the technologies that were available for these specific diseases or for a condition that they were dealing with. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a conversation that people need to know more about. Like, I think there's so many commercials about ask your doctor about this pharmaceutical. And I'm like, nobody says, like, you should ask your doctor about this medical device that actually could
Yeah.
improve your quality of life. And so, my mantra is like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about all the good that MedTech does. It's not to deny that there's bad, that there's risk, that there's things that can happen because of medical technology. There's a lot, someone told me recently, like, if it bleeds, it reads, right? Or something
Yeah.
like, yeah, they want all the drama. I'm like, but there's a lot of good. So maybe we can, shine a little bit of a light on that. And that's what I plan to do with Bluestocking Health.
I love that. And I also will say it's not taking anything away from the doctors and their immense amount of knowledge. They can't keep up with
Absolutely.
all the devices that are out there. If something's affecting you, then you're
Yeah.
going to be hyper obsessed about that one thing. So I
Right.
think it's perfectly justifiable to bring up some of those devices to those doctors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually I have a few doctors, medical doctors on my advisory board, which is an amazing advisory board. And they've been also chiming in about like how do we empower patients or how do we get the folks that are coming into their practice, into their office to ask more just educated questions or things that they need to know. Oftentimes you leave the hospital or you leave the doctor's office and you're like, "Oh man, I really wish I had asked this."
Yeah.
And so, what are the ways that we actually get people thinking about it and talking about it ahead of time so that you're an empowered patient? So,
Yeah. Okay, well, let's jump into the conversation today. You already mentioned some doctors that are on your advisory board. You work closely with innovators, obviously, so many of them. How do you personally decide which term to use, patient or customer, or any other word that you want to pick out? How do you feel about those?
sure, I think it's oh, I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. It depends. Ugh, no. um,
It's bound to happen.
it's about to happen. It's just it's like in my brain. Um, I think there's a lot of folks at FDA even that were like, we don't want to use the word patient, we want to use the word person. And patient actually comes from the term patior, which means to suffer. And I
Mm,
think a lot of folks will look at the word patient and see, I'm not a I'm not a sufferer, or I'm not suffering with this disease. I am living with this disease. I am not a passive person being treated. I am an active person in my care. And so I think it's very important to talk to the person who is dealing with whatever condition or disease, or uh, you know, what do they want to be called, right? I think it's very much like, what does that person prefer? And one of the comments actually that came up at AdvaMed was a woman got up and said, "Oh, to the comment earlier that was asked, I am I relate to the word patient." She's like, "I am a patient living with my disease, but I am absolutely not suffering." Like, she is living and managing, and so I think it's words matter, but it really comes down to like, what does a person want to be called, right?
yeah,
I think patient for me, I feel like I'm a patient. I do have asthma, like I have eczema, like I have so many, and I am a
yeah.
patient that's getting treatment for those various things. But there are other people that really, I'm a person. I want to be, you know, i in control of that word or what the doctors are calling me or what my friends and loved ones are calling me.
There's a historical view that I feel like, and I'm curious, I want to get your take on this. It feels as though the word patient has been somewhat passive, and that I feel like it may
Mhm.
come from a historical use of the expectation that a doctor knows more than I do, and as a general rule, that's probably true in a lot of different
I
realms.
hope
They know
so.
so much more, but and the other thing is with that is the assumption that their goal is the same as the patient's, that we both have the same goal. And as a general rule, I
Mm.
would expect that to be true as well. However, I'm curious if that has evolved slightly, where we have something of a convergence of all the data in the world now that is now being kind of funneled through AI to put that information at the tips of the fingers of those patients. And now they're more informed than ever before on a lot of different things. And not only that, they also have the desire to own their health and own
Yeah.
their outcomes a little bit more. Peter Attia's book Outlive, being one of the the New York Times bestsellers on the whole health span idea, has caused people to want to move past just fixing broken parts of themselves and to really maintaining a high quality of life for a longer period. So I do wonder if there's been a little bit of a shift, and I'm curious if, in your mind, why this debate has come up, because I do feel like it has come up a little bit more than here lately, customer service when it comes to healthcare. Any thoughts there?
I think some of it has to do with, the healthcare system and how it's designed, right? Of the payers, and you are a lot of patients where people will feel that, hey, this is something I'm paying for. I demand good customer service, right? Like I demand to get doctors that are really, thinking about me and have the same goals that I do. Um, I think one of the key parts about care is really, because and doctors are trained, they go through a lot of schooling, they go through a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
education, and they refine their practice, right, after the main part of medical school in order to get really a strong expertise in a certain area. So you're absolutely right. Like you'd hope that they'd have, that they'd really know what you're
Yeah.
like a dermatologist. I'm not gonna go see a pulmonologist for my mole, right? Like that I'm like, um, maybe they know something, but still, I think part of it is, yeah, and you brought up AI as well. I think a lot of folks will do their own research, and I do my own research. I think all of us are entitled to like go online or read or try to find out more information about something that we're dealing with, either with a loved one or ourselves. And even FDA asks for multiple opinions, right? So usually when they have a reader study or there's something that they're evaluating the safety and effectiveness of a device or even an AI device, they usually want, maybe three physicians that are reading the output of the device, or, two, and then maybe an adjudicator. Like, and so what's the issue with saying, all right, I've talked to my doctor, and maybe getting a second opinion, maybe getting a third opinion. Like sometimes that's very challenging. I understand it's like a luxury to be like, I'm going to go talk to a lot of doctors, when
Yeah.
sometimes it's like I really need to take care of this ASAP, right? But even if there is a way to seek another opinion, it's also getting your physician, or who your primary care physician, or whatever expert you're seeing, or what is it? Not the not the expert doctor. I'm like losing now. My language is going.
Specialist.
Specialist. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Words
I haven't
matter.
had
I
enough.
don't know.
Haven't had enough coffee. But like really getting them to understand like what are the things that matter to you, because they're going to treat you like this is how I was trained in medical school. These are the things that I would do if I were in your position, but they also come to the table with their own biases. We all have our own biases. If someone's like, I'm not biased, I'm like, yeah, no, that's not true. Like everyone rocks up with their set of biases. So even if you say, listen, I'm this old, these are the things that are important to me. Like these, I actually, um, I do want to stay independent, or I take care of my grandkids, twice a week. I really want to not be in pain, or I want to not be, um, you know, having to sit down all the time. Those are all really important things of like outlining your priorities and really helping your caregiver, your physician, your specialist to understand what are the priorities that you have, because that may change also the care that you get. So I think there's anyway, that was a really long answer to your
Yeah.
short question, but there's so much in there.
No, it's true. It is interesting how, I mean, I don't think you should ever turn your brain off and just let go of the reins. Kind of a
Yeah,
funny story. I remember I had foot surgery last year, and
I remember that, you being in a boot.
that's right, at LSI. I forgot about
Yeah.
it. Well, so I went through the X-rays, and they give you the lead to wear, and when
Yeah.
I had a follow-up, they didn't give me the lead for my, midsection, area.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, last time, how come I don't have this lead thing there? And they just said, oh, we don't really give the lead protection there at past childbearing age. And I was like, I have a 6-month-old. It's okay. What are you talking about? But no, it was the funniest thing. doesn't matter.
Sir, you need
But
to stop having
yeah, I think that
like,
was
hang
what
on a second.
the little hint they were giving me.
But I
Um,
think it's good to advocate for yourself then too. Like, no, I prefer to have it. Like, you can,
yeah,
like, those are things that like, you should absolutely feel empowered. So I guess back to the word patient. Like, you can be a patient, you can be a person, a customer, but you can also have adjectives prior to those things. I can be an empowered patient. I can be a
yeah,
patient advocate. I can be like, there's certain things that that can define or expand on those words as well.
yeah, and
So.
I really like that too because I think I have a tendency to be a little more black and white than I need to be.
Mm.
I think when I wrote that post, I thought, oh, it's customer service. We need more customer service in
Mhm.
healthcare. But there is a lot of room for patients and to be a patient. And there are a lot of times when customer service just does not make sense. If you're in an ER at 3 a.m. and you have someone with a gunshot wound, hey, we're taking care of business, and it does not matter
Mm.
what you want.
I was
We're
here first. Yeah.
yeah, no,
Like,
this
please
is
take care of that person with the
yeah.
gunshot wound. But yeah.
So I try to be that was just why I'm really thankful that you brought up this conversation again to enlighten me as well to kind of broaden my thinking. One of the other words that you brought up, you mentioned seeing a shift from caregiver to care partner. What's behind that change? Can you expound on
Oh,
that?
yeah. I there was AdvaMed and then there was Wraps. They were like back to back this year. And at Wraps, they had a really great presentation with the Michael J. Fox Foundation representative, as well as a couple. And the woman had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and I think she had been living with it for almost 20 years. And then her husband was on the stage as well. And it was fascinating just to like they were riffing off each other. They were having fun. Like I think he was a writer for Seinfeld. Like they were just
Wow.
so awesome. Like just really fun to listen to, but also had such insightful things to say, of course. And one of the things that he brought up was he said, I call myself a care partner because when I kept saying, I'm a caregiver, and his wife was like, yeah, but like a caretaker is like somebody who goes and like rakes outside or like, waters the property, waters the plants. She's like, I'm not a caretaker. I'm not taking from you. I want to be a partner with you. And so I think it also just spoke to what worked for them, right? Like
Yeah.
they were care partners. They were in this together. And I think again, it's one of those things. Oftentimes we'll have caregiver if we're submitting something to FDA, we'll say here's the definition of the caregiver, or if it's a parent, right, or a guardian of a child, we'll often use caregiver. But I also like the term care partner, and I think it's just language. I mean, there's not just one word for almost anything, right? So I think even having the diversity of words that we can choose from that make us feel most comfortable is maybe the most important.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone described language to me once as kind of like a parade, and you can stand back on the sidelines and you can watch it go past you, and you're like, "Oh, this word used to mean this" or whatever. Or you can get in the parade and kind of live it out. One more cliche I guess I'll use is one of the worst things about communication is the assumption that it has happened, and I
Mhm.
think the right word for the right time makes a lot of sense. So,
Absolutely. Yeah,
um,
and I think
yeah, go ahead.
I think also having a lot of words at our disposal only makes the conversations richer as well, right? I think um, my husband said when he came to the US, he's from Japan, and he came for graduate school, and he said for a few months, like all of his emotions kind of became very simplified. And it's fascinating to hear him talk about, he's like, I didn't have many words for frustrated, or he's like, I was happy, I was sad, I was lonely, but he only had, like very few words to describe in English how he was feeling. Of course, his English was amazing, and he learned very quickly, but
Wow.
having the richness of more words to describe his emotions and to be able to communicate with people really allowed him to feel more confident, more present, and just more like himself.
Yeah,
So yeah.
that's crazy. So you're tickling the brain, the some memory of mine, alexithymia. I think it's alexithymia, the inability to describe emotions. And
Oh,
it's not a personality disorder, but it's actually something where if you give the person the right vocabulary to describe the emotion they're feeling, they can process the emotion much better. That's an
Oh,
interesting thing.
so interesting.
Anyway,
Yeah.
you just
Oh my
make me
gosh,
think of that.
can we do it like we need to do like a blog post about that or something? That's fascinating. I bet yeah, maybe that'll be my dinner conversation with my husband tonight because
Yeah,
he and I are both neuroscientists. He stayed in the academic path and I kind of went, industry direction,
yeah,
but oh, that'll be a fun conversation. I'll
yeah.
get
So
back to you
maybe
on
maybe entering
that.
a new language gives you acute alexithymia for just a moment. But
That.
so I'm curious,
Okay.
how do we tie this to a medtech innovator who's bringing a medical device to market? How do you think they can use the different words like this to their advantage or for the patient's advantage, for the user's advantage? What are the benefits of utilizing this diversity of language?
I think that's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with knowing your end user, whether that be a caregiver or a care partner, or is it the patient, or is it a parent, and um, how do we make sure that the labeling and the way that we're designing clinical studies and the way that we're thinking about our use-related risk assessments when it comes to like human factors or usability testing, all of those things matter when you're thinking about who is going to be using this and interacting with it and what is what are some of the preferred terms that they would like to use because and it sometimes it's very disease specific, right? Like there may be um, certain populations that don't want to be called patient or like um, I know there's a not an argument but there's like definitely a dialogue going online about losing a battle with cancer
Mm,
or um, people
yeah,
saying you
like if
shouldn't
had you fought
say,
harder, then yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And so I think even just like understanding the conversation, one of my advisors, Vanessa Otero, she is the founder of the media bias chart and like the ad fonts media. And she's so like she and I got to talking this a couple months ago, and even her comment of like, people oftentimes will just put stuff on LinkedIn or they'll ask things that they only want to get maybe a specific response to.
Mm,
And it's about audience capture and how do you get more of like people really clicking and liking your content. And she said, but the best posts that she puts out, she's like, are the ones that really start thoughtful dialogue. And it's maybe not like fighting, like you don't want people being rude to each other online. But she's like, I love it when there's two very different thoughts or people are actually having a conversation within the comments, or they take it to, or they have another, like they do a podcast about it to talk about the topics. She's like, because that's where your opinions or where you can actually get more information about like, I didn't think about it that way. And I think that's back to your question of like, how do medtech innovators and entrepreneurs and folks think about the conversation? It's like maybe my assumption or my biases or the things that I think are that I hold as true um, are true, but maybe there's another truth and I should maybe try and consider what
yeah,
other people are thinking about and what they're talking about.
yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it. Um, two things can be true, that's for sure.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Could be the best of times, it could be the worst of times, sometimes
yeah, and it usually is.
usually the goal is to not stay in one or the other, indefinitely. Like, let's talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. I love that phrase. It's something. What is it? Strong opinions held loosely. So I like to
Mm,
talk to people who disagree with me, and if they can change my mind, I feel like, hey, you've helped me out. If you've changed my mind, you've
yeah.
enlightened. I, I've come to realize that you may think you know so many things, but with so many other people in the world, um, there's a good chance there's a better way. So I'm always
Yeah.
thankful when people are willing to show that way.
Yeah.
Um, how do you think the language around these relationships? We talked a little bit about how it influences how we treat one another. Um, do you think it changes the way the care is provided at times?
Oh, I absolutely does. I think it's and I think people will walk away from a interaction or I mean, I think back to your story that you posted on LinkedIn, right? Like I think there's situations that maybe didn't sit well with us, or things that or things that did, right? Sometimes you're like,
Yeah.
wow, that really felt good. And I didn't realize that that was an option. And I think having just being honest with ourselves, like honestly, sometimes it's just like, okay, that didn't feel good. Why didn't that feel good? And I'm a daughter of a family therapist, and it was oftentimes if something stings or something hurts or something is bothering you, what truth is there to what was said that is sitting with you, or is there not truth to it, and there you have to figure out like what are the ways that I'm going to address that, or as I move forward, what are the ways that I'm not going to allow that to happen to me again, right? Or like what
Yeah.
are the what are the words that I can now empower myself with, so if that does happen again, what are the things that I can respond with?
Right. Yeah. When I got a little distracted when you said, or a good real or good interaction with healthcare or whatever, because
Yeah.
I was remembering, I thought, huh, what's a really good interaction I had? And I remember one, and I'll just say it because I don't know if it's helpful or not, but when my last baby was being delivered, my wife was in labor, and I don't want to go into too much detail publicly, of course, but she was grabbing onto my arm as at some of the worst moments, and the nurse came over to do something because my wife has a pacemaker, and so she gets special care during
Oh,
those
wow.
situations and so on.
Yeah.
And I was trying to get out of the way so the nurse could get there. I said, "Here, I'm sorry." I was like, as the husband, I feel like the least important person in that room in that moment with all the other people doing their thing. And I said, "I'm sorry, I'll get out of the way here." And she said, "No, you are exactly where I want you right now." I'm like, "Okay." And
Thank
I mean, I knew
you.
that's what my wife wanted, but anybody else, I don't know. I'll do whatever you want me to do in that moment because
Yeah.
yeah. But that was a really interesting interaction that I had, and I don't know that we think about some of the ancillary people in a room in a
Mm,
situation as we're building out our devices that may apply to these different unique situations. I thought that was just
yeah.
an interesting
Oh,
thing.
it's so yeah, and I think it takes a village, even in that delivery room or even in the care team. Um, I I recently had like a similar situation where totally not similar at all,
Yeah.
actually, but it tickled a part of my brain that I was like, the good experience that I had on a telemedicine phone call. Like I had to talk to an allergist because again, I've had asthma, I had this chronic cough that I've been dealing with, and I my primary care physician was like, "I want to have you talk to this allergist," and when they set up the appointment, someone called me and said, "We're going to set this appointment. It's going to be a 30-minute phone call because before you come in, we need to have the phone call." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like what are we going to get in 30 minutes on a phone call about something that I need to be there in person?" Like I was just kind of Anyway, this doctor calls me, they're like, "Sit by the phone." Called me right on time. And he asked me such thoughtful, careful questions. He heard everything I had to say. He didn't and I was like, "Okay, this is gonna sound stupid," but and then I would say it, and he's like, "That's not stupid at all. That's actually super helpful because," and then he would follow up with the next question. And it was so when I got off that phone call, I had a diagnosis for my chronic cough and a way to treat it, and I was just like, "I can't thank you enough." Like, I had so
Wow.
many assumptions and my biases walking into the phone call, in my living room, like, "This is not gonna be useful," and I walked out thinking like, I need to maybe walk in with a little bit more of an open mind, and also I was just so thankful to him. I was like, "You changed my life today. Like, I can't thank you enough." And so I
Wow,
think
that's
having
yeah.
even just those moments of, like, you're exactly where you need to be, and maybe there is a reason for why, like, why you needed to be standing next to your wife, like, she needed you in that moment, or, like, I
Yeah.
love, those positive stories are one of the other things that I'm really trying to amplify on Bluestocking Health because I feel like too often we talk about the negative, and we
Yeah.
should, but we also need to talk about what are the good things that happened to us today.
Yeah. 100%. I'm curious if you think we'll ever land on I don't know, a single term for some of these things, or
No.
maybe the solution is like you're saying, where we qualify it like an empowered patient or so on. Um, any thoughts? I mean, if or maybe plurality is the goal. I'm not sure I can say that word.
Yeah, I know. I don't think there's ever one word that's going to define any one person or any one feeling, right? Like I think having the qualifiers, giving us maybe more qualifiers, maybe that's the answer, right? Of just like, um, here are the various things that I'm experiencing today. Like my my daughter on her wall has like a Mr. Potato Head grid, and it's like all the Mr. Potato Heads, and
Oh,
like
wow.
one's like grumpy and one's, and it's like a lot of different emotions that Mr. Potato Head is feeling. And she'll put the little red ring around, today I'm feeling dissatisfied, or yeah, well, the
Yeah,
youngest, she definitely like she has a lot of emotions. So we
I
try to
imagine.
name them in order to give her the tools so she can express how she's feeling. And I think that's kind of what we need to do for health
Yeah,
the healthcare system.
yeah, that's cool. Um, if there was one takeaway that you would want those listening to take away, or a piece of advice, or whatever it is, what would that be, do you think?
Watch this podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I think that there's no one correct word, right? Like I hope that people didn't start watching this podcast thinking like, "Oh,
I'm gonna
we're
figure it
finally
out.
gonna figure it out."
Yep.
And if anything, it's that there is no one correct, 100% right word, that language evolves as our understanding of the language evolves. And I think whatever you want to call yourself and how you want to identify is really the way that we respect each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for a medtech innovator, really knowing that and really having a good handle on what this person needs in this moment, whether
Yeah.
it's, and I don't want to keep belaboring this, but if I go back to the different scenarios where one might be an emergent situation and one might be I want to improve my life, and so that those are going to be probably handled slightly differently. And I
Hmm.
think maybe the medtech innovators who recognize that might be ones who are going to be a little bit more cognizant, maybe the ones who win a little bit more. So
I love that. Yeah. I mean, words can be limiting. They can make you feel small or they can make you feel sort of like limited, but they can also be liberating. And I think the companies that are open-minded to that and open to learning more about the populations that they're aiming to serve or improve quality of life are going to be the ones that win,
nice.
come out on top. Yeah.
That was a mic drop right there. Limiting
Ooh,
or liberating. That was good. All right, I think we ought to just wrap it up there. That was great, Allison. Always love getting to talk to you. And those who are
likewise.
listening, definitely check out what Allison is doing with Blue Stocking. She's amplifying medtech and she's trying to have these conversations more and more in different places. So you'll probably see more and more of her. I hope so anyway. And if you, we'll put the links in the show notes so that you can easily find her. But thank you so much for listening. We'll let you all get back to it. Everybody, take care.